A divorced mother and her freezing children believe it's the end as they shiver in the forest, until an adventurous CEO brings them to his mansion and offers them the most precious gift of all, love and care. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The car sputtered and died with a final shudder, the last gasp of warmth from the heater fading into the frigid air. Sarah Morgan gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands, knuckles white not just from cold, but from the crushing realization that they were stranded. Outside, snow fell in thick flakes, hypnotic in the beam of the faltering headlights before they too dimmed and extinguished. The forest around them was a wall of darkness, broken only by the ghostly silhouettes of pine trees bowing under the weight of snow. "Mommy, I'm cold," came a small voice from the back seat. 6-year-old Lily hugged her worn teddy bear tightly, her breath forming tiny clouds in the rapidly cooling car. Beside her, 8-year-old Ethan tried to look brave, but his chattering teeth betrayed him. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're just taking a little break," Sarah forced a smile, though panic bloomed in her chest. She checked her phone again, no signal, just as there hadn't been for the last hour as they ventured deeper into the mountains, taking the shortcut the gas station attendant had suggested. A shortcut that was supposed to save them time and money, both of which were in desperately short supply since the divorce. The divorce. Even thinking the word sent a stab of pain through her. 3 months since Richard had walked out, leaving nothing but debts and broken promises. 3 months of struggling to keep their rented apartment, of working double shifts at the diner, of explaining to the children why Daddy wasn't coming home. And now this desperate journey to her sister's house in Colorado, where a job and a fresh start awaited, if they could reach it. "Maybe we should call for help," suggested Ethan, his voice small but practical. Sarah swallowed hard. "No signal, buddy. But don't worry, I have a plan." She didn't, not really, but she couldn't let them see her fear. Outside, the snow was falling faster, the wind picking up. They were at least 20 miles from the last town they'd passed through, and who knew how far from the next one. "Are we going to die, Mommy?" Lily's question hung in the air, innocent yet devastating. "No, baby. Absolutely not." Sarah's voice was firm even as her mind raced. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and they had only a few blankets, some snacks, and a half-empty bottle of water. The car would become an icebox by morning. They needed shelter, and they needed it now. "We're going to play a game," she announced, turning to face her children with forced cheerfulness. "It's called Winter Explorers. We're going to bundle up and find a better place to wait until morning. Then we'll get help." Ethan's eyes widened with understanding beyond his years. "But it's dark out there, Mom." "I have a flashlight." Sarah pulled the small light from the glove compartment, silently thanking Richard for at least insisting they keep an emergency kit in the car, even if he'd taken almost everything else. "And we have our warm coats and gloves. It's an adventure." The children looked unconvinced, but they dutifully pulled on their coats, hats, and gloves while Sarah gathered their meager supplies into her backpack. The flashlight beam was weak, but it was all they had. "Stay close, hold hands, and follow me," she instructed, trying to sound confident as they stepped out into the biting cold. The snow was already ankle-deep and falling fast, the wind cutting through their clothes like knives. They trudged through the snow, Sarah leading the way with the flashlight, scanning desperately for any sign of shelter. Each step was a battle against the wind and the growing snowdrifts. Lily began to cry softly, while Ethan trudged silently, his face set in determination too old for his years. "Just a little farther," Sarah encouraged, though she had no idea where they were going. The trees seemed to close in around them, identical in their snow-laden branches, offering no guidance. Her feet were numb, her hands burning with cold despite her gloves. The children were slowing, Lily stumbling every few steps. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Sarah spotted it. A small clearing ahead and what looked like a structure of some kind. "Look!" she pointed, hope flaring. "I think there's a cabin." They pushed forward with renewed energy, but as they approached, Sarah's heart sank. It wasn't a cabin, but an old shed or workshop of some kind, its roof partially collapsed, one wall missing entirely. Still, it was better than nothing, offering at least some protection from the wind and snow. "It's perfect," she lied, guiding the children inside. The concrete floor was cold but dry in the corners where the roof still held. Sarah cleared away some fallen branches and debris, creating a small space where they could sit together. "Now we'll make our camp," she said, unfolding the blankets and wrapping them around Lily and Ethan. "Huddle together for warmth just like penguins." The children pressed against her, their small bodies shivering. Sarah wrapped her arms around them, trying to share what little warmth she had. She offered them the snacks, some crackers and a chocolate bar, saving none for herself. "Tell us a story, Mommy," Lily requested, her voice muffled against Sarah's coat. "Yeah, a good one," Ethan added, trying to sound cheerful for his sister's sake. Sarah began a tale about brave explorers who discovered a magical warm kingdom in the heart of a snowy forest. As she spoke, she watched the snow continue to fall through the gaps in the roof, piling in drifts at the open wall. The wind howled, driving the temperature lower. Her voice remained steady, but her mind was calculating their chances, and the numbers weren't good. If the storm continued, if no one came by in the morning, if the temperature dropped much further. She pushed the thoughts away and focused on the story, on keeping the children calm and as warm as possible. But deep down, a terrible certainty was growing. They might not survive until morning. Hours passed, or perhaps it was minutes. Time seemed distorted in the cold and dark. The flashlight dimmed further and Sarah switched it off to save the battery. The darkness pressed in, absolute except for the faint ghostly glow of snow. Lily had fallen into a fitful sleep, but Ethan remained awake, his eyes reflecting what little light remained. "Mom," he whispered, "are we really going to be okay?" Sarah pulled him closer. "We're together, and that's what matters most. Just rest now." But rest wouldn't come. Sarah's mind tumbled with regrets and fears. She should have checked the weather forecast more carefully, should have had the car serviced, should have taken the main highway despite the extra mileage. So many should-haves that were useless now. The cold was becoming unbearable, seeping into her bones, making her thoughts sluggish. She worried about hypothermia, especially for the children. They needed to stay awake, to keep moving somehow, but she didn't have the heart to disturb their rest, however uneasy it was. A sound penetrated her haze, a mechanical rumble, distant but distinct from the wind. Sarah strained to listen. Was she imagining it? But no, there it was again, growing louder. An engine. "Ethan, Lily, wake up!" She shook them gently. "I think someone's coming." The sound grew louder still. Not a car, but something bigger, more powerful. Suddenly, beams of light swept across the trees outside, brilliant and blinding after the darkness. "Help!" Sarah shouted, her voice hoarse. "We're here! Help us!" She stumbled to her feet, legs nearly buckling, and made her way to the open wall of the shed. The lights were closer now, and she could make out the shape of a vehicle, a large SUV or truck moving slowly along what must be a hidden driveway or road they hadn't seen in the dark. Sarah waved frantically, using the last of her strength to shout again. The vehicle stopped, its headlights illuminating the shed and the three desperate figures inside. For a moment, nothing happened, and Sarah feared they hadn't been seen after all. Then the driver's door opened, and a tall figure stepped out into the snow. The beam of a powerful flashlight cut through the darkness, finding Sarah and the children huddled in their fragile shelter. The figure approached quickly, his steps purposeful in the deep snow. "My God, what are you doing out here?" A deep voice, male and commanding but with an undertone of concern. As he drew closer, the light revealed a man perhaps in his early 40s, dressed in expensive winter gear, his face partially obscured by a scarf but his eyes sharp and assessing. Our car broke down, Sarah explained, her voice weak. We've been walking, found this place. You're freezing, he stated the obvious, quickly shining the light over the children. All of you. We need to get you warm immediately. Without hesitation, he unwrapped his own scarf and placed it around Lily's neck, then lifted the half-conscious child into his arms. Can you walk? He asked Sarah and Ethan. Sarah nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. Ethan grabbed her hand and together they followed the stranger back to his vehicle, a large black SUV with chains on the tires, built for these conditions in a way their old sedan never could be. The warmth hit them as soon as the doors opened. Glorious, life-giving heat pouring from vents in the luxurious interior. The man gently placed Lily in the back seat, then helped Sarah and Ethan inside. I'm Alexander Reed, he introduced himself, quickly turning up the heat even further and pulling emergency blankets from a compartment. My lodge is about 5 minutes from here. We'll get you properly warmed up there. Sarah Morgan, she managed, the sudden change in temperature making her dizzy. My children, Ethan and Lily. Thank you. We were... Save your strength, Alexander advised, his tone brooking no argument. We'll talk when you're safe. As they drove, Sarah fought to stay conscious, the gentle motion and warmth threatening to pull her under. Alexander spoke quietly into a phone, giving instructions to someone about preparing rooms and hot drinks, calling a doctor. His voice was reassuring in its confidence and control. The lodge turned out to be a vast, modern structure of glass and timber, perched on the mountainside with lights blazing warmly from every window. As they pulled up to the entrance, doors opened, and people emerged. A middle-aged woman in comfortable clothing, a younger man who might have been a caretaker or assistant. Martha, these people need immediate attention, Alexander directed as he lifted Lily again. Possible hypothermia, especially the little one. What followed was a blur of activity. Sarah and the children were ushered into a great room dominated by a massive stone fireplace where flames leaped high. They were gently stripped of their wet outer clothing, wrapped in soft, warm blankets and seated close to the fire. Martha, who turned out to be the housekeeper, brought steaming mugs of something sweet and hot that Sarah couldn't identify but gratefully accepted. The doctor will be here soon, Alexander informed them, now removing his own coat to reveal an expensive sweater and the athletic build of a man who kept himself in excellent condition despite the demands of whatever work had paid for this magnificent home. The roads are bad, but he has a vehicle similar to mine. Sarah tried to express her gratitude, but the words wouldn't come properly. The contrast between their desperate situation in the shed and this cocoon of luxury and safety was too much to process. Rest now, Alexander said, his expression softening as he looked at the children, who were already beginning to show signs of recovery in the warmth, color returning to their cheeks. You're safe here. Everything else can wait until morning. As Sarah finally surrendered to exhaustion, her last conscious thought was that they had been saved, literally plucked from the jaws of death by this mysterious man with his mountain palace and commanding presence. But even in her relief, a small voice warned her that nothing this miraculous came without a price. What would Alexander Reed want in return for his life-saving intervention? Sarah awoke gradually, consciousness returning in layers. First came the sensation of warmth, then softness. A feather mattress, silken sheets, a down comforter. Her body felt heavy, pleasantly so, as if she'd slept for days rather than hours. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, eyes closed, afraid that opening them might shatter this cocoon of comfort and return her to the frozen shed. Memory flooded back, the broken-down car, the desperate trek through snow, the paralyzing cold, and then rescue. Alexander Reed with his powerful SUV and commanding presence. Her eyes flew open. The children. She sat up quickly, taking in her surroundings. The room was spacious and elegant, with timber-beamed ceilings and large windows revealing a pristine winter landscape beyond. Morning light streamed in, making the snow-covered mountains glitter like diamonds. But none of this mattered. "Ethan! Lily?" she called, her voice raspy. The door opened almost immediately, and Martha, the housekeeper she vaguely remembered from the night before, entered carrying a tray. "Good morning, Mrs. Morgan. Your children are perfectly fine," she said, her tone reassuring as she set the tray on a bedside table. "They've been up for hours, having breakfast with Mr. Reed. He thought it best to let you rest." Relief washed over Sarah, so intense she fell back against the pillows. "What time is it?" "Just past 10. You've slept nearly 12 hours. Martha poured something from a silver pot into a delicate china cup. "Dr. Winters checked on you during the night. He said you were exhausted and suffering from mild hypothermia, but nothing that rest and warmth couldn't cure. The children bounced back even faster, as they often do." Sarah accepted the offered cup, finding it contained rich, aromatic coffee. "I don't know how to thank you or Mr. Reed. If he hadn't found us—" "No need to think about that now," Martha cut in gently. "You're safe. That's what matters. I've left some clothes for you in the bathroom. Nothing fancy, but they should fit well enough until we can retrieve your things from your car." "Our car?" Sarah remembered with a groan. "It's still out there with most of our belongings. Mr. Reed has already arranged for it to be towed to the nearest garage. He's very efficient that way," Martha added with what seemed like pride. "Now, drink your coffee, have some breakfast, and take a hot shower. I'll let the children know you're awake." After Martha left, Sarah did exactly as suggested, marveling at the luxury of the ensuite bathroom with its rainfall shower and heated floors. The borrowed clothes, a soft sweater and comfortable jeans that fit surprisingly well, made her aware of how shabby her own wardrobe had become in recent months, as every spare dollar went to keeping the children fed and the rent paid. Following the sound of laughter, Sarah made her way downstairs, taking in the full grandeur of the lodge in daylight. It was even more impressive than she'd realized. A perfect blend of rustic mountain architecture and modern luxury, with soaring ceilings, walls of glass framing spectacular views, and furniture that looked both expensive and inviting. She found Ethan and Lily in a spacious kitchen, seated at an island counter, demolishing what appeared to be their second breakfast. Alexander Reed stood at the stove, expertly flipping pancakes, wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt that somehow still managed to look tailored. "Mommy!" Lily spotted her first, jumping down from her stool and running to wrap her arms around Sarah's legs. "Mr. Alex made pancakes with faces and hot chocolate with the little marshmallows." "Mr. Alex, is it?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, lifting her daughter for a proper hug, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair. Alexander turned from the stove, spatula in hand, and gave a small, self-deprecating shrug. Alex seemed less formal. "Your children are delightful company, Mrs. Morgan." "Sarah, please," she replied, setting Lily down and moving to hug Ethan, who pretended to be too grown up for such displays but leaned into her embrace nonetheless. "And thank you doesn't begin to cover what we owe you." "You don't owe me anything," he said firmly, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone could have," Sarah countered, taking a seat next to Ethan. "Not everyone has a vehicle that can navigate these roads in a blizzard or a home like this to bring us to." Something flickered across Alexander's face, a momentary tightness around his eyes. "I've been fortunate in life. It's good to put that fortune to meaningful use occasionally." There was a story there, Sarah sensed. But before she could respond, Martha entered. "The garage called, Mr. Reed. They've examined Mrs. Morgan's car. I'm afraid the news isn't good." Sarah's heart sank as Martha explained the extent of the damage: a cracked engine block from the cold, multiple electrical failures, and several other issues. The cost of repairs would far exceed the value of the aging vehicle. "I see," Sarah said faintly, mind racing. Without a car, how would they reach her sisters? How would she get to the job that was waiting? The small emergency fund she'd scraped together wouldn't cover a replacement vehicle, not even close. "Perhaps we could discuss this later," Alexander suggested, glancing meaningfully at the children who were watching with worried expressions. "Of course," Sarah forced a smile. "These pancakes look amazing. Is that blueberries I see?" The conversation shifted to lighter topics, though Sarah's mind continued to grapple with their precarious situation. After breakfast, Alexander suggested the children might enjoy exploring the game room downstairs, equipped with everything from video games to a pool table. They departed eagerly, leaving the adults alone in the kitchen. "I want to help," Alexander said without preamble, leaning against the counter. "Before you object, please hear me out." Sarah, who had indeed been preparing to object, closed her mouth and nodded. "I gather you were headed somewhere specific when your car broke down," he continued, "not just out for a drive in a blizzard with 2 young children." "My sister lives in Colorado Springs," Sarah explained, seeing no reason to withhold the information. "She's found me a job at the hospital where she works. Administrative, nothing glamorous, but better than what I had. We were going to stay with her until I could afford a place of our own." Alexander nodded. "A fresh start." "Yes," Sarah admitted. Then, surprising herself with her candor, added, "My ex-husband left 3 months ago. The divorce was finalized last month, but he'd been emptying our accounts for some time before that, preparing his exit. I didn't see it coming, which seems naive in retrospect." "Not naive." Alexander's voice was quiet but intense. "Trusting. There's a difference." Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more closely. His expression was unreadable, but there was a tension in his jawline that suggested personal experience with betrayal. "Regardless," she said after a moment, "we need to get to Colorado Springs. I'll figure something out." "I have a proposition," Alexander said, straightening. "I need to be in Denver tomorrow for business. It's a short drive from there to Colorado Springs. I would be happy to take you and your children." Sarah blinked, taken aback by the offer. "That's incredibly generous, but we couldn't impose—" "It's not an imposition if it's offered freely," he cut in smoothly. "Besides, the weather has cleared and the drive will be pleasant. Consider it a chance for your children to see some of the most beautiful scenery in America in comfort, rather than worrying about an unreliable vehicle on mountain roads." Put that way, it was hard to refuse, especially when the alternative was, what? Spending money they didn't have on a bus or train, lugging their belongings through stations with 2 tired children. "Thank you," she said finally. "We accept, and we're grateful." A genuine smile transformed Alexander's serious face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek and lighting his gray eyes. "Excellent. We'll leave first thing tomorrow. In the meantime, I thought perhaps a tour of the property might be in order. The snowfall has stopped, and the views are spectacular." The rest of the day passed in a pleasant haze. Alexander proved to be a thoughtful host and an excellent tour guide, showing them around his extensive property with its private trails and stunning vistas. The children, bundled in warm clothing borrowed from what seemed to be an inexhaustible supply, ran ahead, throwing snowballs and laughing. "You mentioned business in Denver," Sarah said as they walked. "What kind of work do you do?" "I run an investment firm," Alexander replied, helping her navigate a slippery section of path. His hand on her elbow was strong and steady, primarily focused on sustainable technologies and healthcare innovations. "Successful, clearly," Sarah observed, looking back at the lodge. Alexander's expression turned wry. "Yes, though success has its complexities." Again, Sarah sensed there was more to the story, but Alexander deftly changed the subject, pointing out a family of deer at the edge of the forest. His knowledge of local wildlife was impressive, and soon he was engaged in answering Ethan's endless questions about the mountains and their inhabitants. Later, as dusk fell, they gathered in the great room where they'd first been brought the night before. The fire blazed warmly and Martha served hot drinks and a delicious dinner that the children devoured with enthusiasm born of fresh air and exercise. Sarah observed Alexander with her children, noting his patience with Lily's rambling stories and his genuine interest in Ethan's more serious inquiries. He was clearly unaccustomed to children, occasionally looking surprised by their directness or energy, but he adapted quickly, treating them with the same respect he showed adults. After dinner, Alexander excused himself to take a business call, and Sarah supervised the children's baths in the luxurious bathroom attached to the guest room they'd been given to share. As she tucked them into bed, Lily asked the question that had been hovering unspoken all day. "Is Mr. Alex an angel, Mommy? Like in the stories?" Sarah smiled, smoothing her daughter's damp hair. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" "Because he saved us when we were cold, and he has a big, beautiful house, and he makes good pancakes," Lily explained, as if these were the obvious qualifications for celestial beings. "I don't think he's an angel," Ethan said thoughtfully. "But maybe he's like that rich guy in the comics who helps people. You know, with the cool car and the big house?" Sarah suppressed a laugh at the comparison. "I think Mr. Alex is just a kind man who was in the right place at the right time, and we're very lucky he found us." After the children fell asleep, Sarah returned to the great room, drawn by the fire and the peaceful atmosphere. She found Alexander there, standing by the window, gazing out at the moonlit snow, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He turned at her approach, and for a moment they regarded each other in silence. "Your children are remarkable," he said finally. "Resilient and intelligent. You've done well with them." "Thank you," Sarah replied, genuinely touched by the compliment. "They're everything to me." Alexander gestured to a comfortable chair near the fire. "Please join me, unless you're tired." "Not at all." Sarah sat, accepting the glass of wine he offered from a side table. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something." "Anything." "Why were you out driving in that storm last night? Martha mentioned you were supposed to be in Denver already." Alexander's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I postponed my trip because of the weather. As for why I was driving—" He paused, swirling the liquid in his glass. "Let's just say I sometimes find this house too quiet, too empty. I was restless." The admission seemed to cost him something, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability beneath the composed exterior. Sarah found herself wanting to know more about this complex man who lived alone in his mountain palace, who made pancakes for strange children and drove through blizzards to escape the silence of his beautiful home. But before she could frame another question, Alexander smiled and raised his glass in a small toast. "To fortunate coincidences," he said. "To fortunate coincidences," Sarah echoed, though she was beginning to wonder if their meeting had been coincidence at all, or something more like fate. Morning arrived with clear skies, the storm having exhausted itself overnight. Sarah woke early, anxiety about their journey mingling with an inexplicable sense of reluctance to leave the sanctuary of Alexander's lodge. She packed their few belongings, most still in the suitcases that had been retrieved from their car, now sitting abandoned at the garage. When she entered the kitchen with the children, Alexander was already there, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that transformed him from casual mountain dweller to sophisticated businessman. Martha bustled around preparing breakfast and packing what she called road provisions. "Good morning," Alexander greeted them, his smile softening the formality of his attire. "I trust you all slept well?" "Like hibernating bears," Sarah confirmed, accepting a cup of coffee from Martha. "We're ready whenever you are." "After breakfast," he insisted. "Long journeys require proper fuel." The meal was a cheerful affair, with Lily chattering excitedly about seeing her aunt and Ethan asking detailed questions about Alexander's SUV, which apparently had made quite an impression. Sarah noticed that Alexander had a gift for answering the boy in a way that was neither condescending nor overly complex, meeting him precisely at his level of understanding. As they prepared to depart, Martha presented Sarah with a package. "Just some essentials for the children," she explained, when Sarah began to protest, "and a few treats for the journey. Please," she added in a lower voice, "it does Mr. Reed good to help. He needs it more than you know." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, Alexander appeared, keys in hand. "The car is warmed up and ready. Shall we?" The SUV was even more luxurious than Sarah remembered, with buttery leather seats and a high-tech entertainment system that immediately captured the children's attention. Alexander had thoughtfully loaded it with age-appropriate films and games. "You've thought of everything," Sarah remarked as they pulled away from the lodge, the children already engrossed in a movie playing on screens built into the headrests. "I try to be prepared," Alexander replied, handling the powerful vehicle with easy confidence. "It's a professional habit that spills over into personal life." The drive was spectacular, winding through mountain passes where sunlight sparkled on fresh snow and valleys opened up below them like scenes from a postcard. Alexander proved to be an engaging companion, pointing out landmarks and sharing interesting facts about the region. He had a dry, intelligent wit that made Sarah laugh more than she had in months. During a stop at a scenic overlook while the children burned off energy throwing snowballs, Alexander received a phone call. Sarah couldn't help overhearing his side of the conversation, something about market positions and strategy adjustments. His tone was markedly different, authoritative, decisive, with none of the warmth he'd shown them. "Sorry about that," he said upon returning. "Work never entirely stops, even when I'm technically out of office." "You sound different when you're in CEO mode," Sarah observed. "More ruthless?" Alexander suggested with a wry smile. "It's a persona in many ways, necessary for survival in my world." "And which is the real Alexander Reed? The ruthless CEO or the man who makes pancakes for strangers' children?" He considered this, eyes on the distant mountains. "Perhaps neither. Or both. Does anyone show their true self all the time?" It was a deflection, but a thoughtful one. Sarah let it stand, sensing that Alexander's barriers weren't easily breached. Back on the road, the children eventually fell asleep, lulled by the motion and the comfortable warmth of the car. In the ensuing quiet, the conversation between Sarah and Alexander deepened. "You mentioned your sister found you a job," he said. "What kind of work did you do before?" "I was an event coordinator for a hotel chain," Sarah replied, watching the scenery drift by. "I was good at it too, but after Ethan was born, Richard, my ex, thought it would be better if I stayed home. When Lily came along, it seemed to make sense. By the time I realized I should have kept one foot in the professional world, my skills were outdated and my contacts had moved on. And now? Now I'll take what I can get. The position at the hospital is administrative, scheduling surgeries, coordinating with insurance, that sort of thing. Not exactly glamorous, but it's steady with benefits, which is what the kids need." Alexander nodded. "Practical. But is it what you want?" The question caught Sarah off guard. What she wanted had seemed irrelevant for so long, first subjugated to her husband's career and preferences, then to the immediate necessities of survival after he left. "I haven't really thought about it that way," she admitted. "Right now, want is a luxury." Alexander's response was noncommittal, but something in his expression suggested he wasn't satisfied with her answer. "And your ex-husband? Is he involved with the children?" Sarah's hands tightened in her lap. "He calls sometimes, sent Christmas gifts, expensive ones, as if that makes up for everything else. He's in Seattle now, with his new girlfriend. She's 24. Ah, the classic midlife crisis, complete with trophy girlfriend." Alexander's tone was sardonic. "How original of him." The comment startled a laugh out of Sarah. "Yes, well, Richard always did follow the crowd. He probably read about it in some men's magazine." How to abandon your family and feel good about it. They shared a smile that felt conspiratorial, two adults recognizing the absurdities of human behavior. "And you?" Sarah asked after a moment. "Martha mentioned you live alone. Have you always?" A shadow crossed Alexander's face. "No, I was married once, a lifetime ago." The finality in his tone suggested loss rather than divorce, but before Sarah could decide whether to probe further, Alexander switched subjects, asking about her sister and their relationship. Sarah allowed the diversion, talking about Claire and her husband Mike, their welcoming home in Colorado Springs, the close bond the sisters had maintained despite geographic distance. "They've been my lifeline these past months," she concluded. "I don't know what I would have done without them." "Family is precious," Alexander said softly. "Those who have it should cherish it." Again, Sarah sensed a story behind his words, a personal history that shaped his perspective in ways she couldn't yet understand. They stopped for lunch at a charming roadside restaurant where Alexander was clearly known, receiving warm greetings from the staff and what appeared to be their best table. The children, refreshed from their nap, were on their best behavior, though Lily enchanted everyone by spontaneously hugging the waitress who brought her hot chocolate with extra whipped cream. "Your daughter is very affectionate," Alexander observed as they returned to the car. "Too much so sometimes," Sarah sighed. "We've had many talks about appropriate boundaries with strangers, but she sees the good in everyone. It's her gift and my worry." "And Ethan?" "Ethan processes everything internally. He watches, analyzes, plans. He's been the man of the house since Richard left, in his own 8-year-old way. I try to let him know he doesn't need to be, but he feels the responsibility regardless," Alexander finished. "He's protective of you both. It's evident in the way he positions himself, always slightly in front, always alert." Sarah was impressed by his observation. "Yes, exactly that. You notice a lot. In my business, noticing details can mean the difference between success and failure," he replied. "People reveal themselves in 1,000 small ways if you're paying attention." "And what have I revealed?" Sarah asked impulsively. Alexander glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Strength, resilience, a capacity for joy despite circumstances that might have crushed a lesser person, and a fierce, uncompromising love for your children that shapes every decision you make." The assessment was so accurate, so seeing, that Sarah felt momentarily exposed, as if Alexander had peered directly into her soul. "I'm not sure about the strength part," she admitted. "Most days I'm terrified I'm going to fail them." "That fear is precisely what makes you strong," Alexander countered. "The acknowledgement of what's at stake." As they continued their journey, the mountains gradually gave way to the outskirts of Denver. The city spread before them, modern and vibrant against the backdrop of the Rockies. Alexander navigated the increasing traffic with the same ease he'd shown on mountain roads. "We'll stop at my apartment to freshen up," he announced. "I need to change for my meeting, and you and the children might appreciate a break from the car before the final leg to Colorado Springs." His apartment turned out to be a penthouse in one of Denver's most exclusive buildings, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city and mountains beyond. A housekeeper greeted them, not Martha, but a younger woman named Elena, who showed the same warmth and efficiency. While Alexander retreated to prepare for his meeting, Elena showed Sarah and the children to guest rooms where they could rest and refresh themselves. The children were immediately drawn to the terrace, safely enclosed behind glass barriers, where they could watch the city spread out below like a living map. Left momentarily alone, Sarah wandered the main living area, taking in the tasteful furnishings and original artwork. Unlike the lodge, which despite its luxury had a lived-in warmth, this space felt more like a showcase, beautiful but impersonal, as if Alexander spent little emotional energy here. The only exception was a small collection of framed photographs on a side table. Sarah approached them curiously. Most showed spectacular landscapes from around the world, but one stood out, a much younger Alexander with a beautiful dark-haired woman, both laughing against a backdrop of Paris's Eiffel Tower. They looked blissfully happy, completely absorbed in each other. "My wife, Sophia." Sarah turned, startled to find Alexander watching her from the doorway. He'd changed into a different suit, even more elegant than the first, and his hair was freshly styled. But it was the expression on his face that caught her attention, a complex mixture of sorrow, fondness, and something harder to define. "She was lovely," Sarah said simply. Yes, she was. Alexander moved to stand beside her, looking down at the photograph. "She died 12 years ago. Cancer. I'm so sorry." Sarah's response was inadequate but sincere. It was quick, mercifully, 3 months from diagnosis to the end. She was only 30. Alexander carefully replaced the frame. "You remind me of her sometimes. Not physically. Sophia was Italian, with coloring very different from yours. But your spirit, your determination, she had those qualities in abundance." The comparison seemed to make him uncomfortable, as if he'd revealed more than he intended. He checked his watch. "I should go. My meeting will take about 2 hours. Elena will take care of anything you and the children need." "Alexander," Sarah said, using his full name for the first time since she'd suggested calling him Alex. "Thank you for everything." He paused, looking at her intently. "When I found you in that shed, you were prepared to die for your children. You'd positioned yourself so they received the most protection from your body heat, while you took the brunt of the cold. That kind of selflessness is rare, Sarah, rarer than you might think. If anyone should be thanking anyone, it's me thanking you for restoring a small measure of my faith in humanity." With that enigmatic statement, he departed, leaving Sarah to contemplate what experiences had made Alexander Reed so simultaneously generous and guarded, so capable of kindness yet so apparently alone in the world. During Alexander's absence, the penthouse became a temporary playground for the children. Elena proved to be wonderfully indulgent, providing snacks and showing them how to operate the impressive entertainment system. Within minutes, Ethan was absorbed in a documentary about space exploration on the enormous television, while Lily convinced Elena to help her bake cookies in the state-of-the-art kitchen. Sarah took the opportunity to call her sister, stepping onto the terrace for privacy. The connection crackled slightly as Claire's voice came through. "Sarah, we've been so worried. You were supposed to be here yesterday." "I know, I'm sorry." Sarah quickly explained about the car breaking down and their rescue. "We're in Denver now, at Alexander's apartment. He's going to drive us to Colorado Springs after his meeting." "Alexander?" Claire's tone was immediately suspicious. "Who exactly is this man who just happened to find you in the middle of nowhere?" Sarah realized how the story must sound to her practically minded sister. "It does seem incredible, doesn't it? But he's legitimate, Claire. He runs an investment firm. The penthouse we're in right now probably cost more than we'll earn in our lifetimes." "Rich doesn't automatically mean trustworthy," Claire pointed out. "Have you Googled him? Checked his story?" Sarah hadn't, and felt a flash of guilt for her unquestioning acceptance of Alexander's help. "He's been nothing but kind and respectful." "I'm sure he has." Claire's voice softened. "But be careful, okay? Men like that, wealthy, single, they often have agendas." "It's not like that," Sarah protested, though she wasn't entirely sure what "like that" might entail. "He's just helping us." "If you say so. Text me when you're on the way and we'll be waiting. Mike is making his famous lasagna to welcome you." After the call ended, Sarah remained on the terrace, Claire's words echoing in her mind. Had she been too trusting, too quick to accept Alexander's generosity without question? Out of curiosity, she took out her phone and typed his name into a search engine. The results were impressive and reassuring. Alexander Reed was indeed the founder and CEO of Reed Ventures, a highly successful investment firm specializing in healthcare and sustainable technology. Images showed him at charity galas, business conferences, and receiving awards. Articles described his business acumen, philanthropic efforts, and occasional appearances on financial news programs. One piece mentioned his intensely private personal life following the tragic death of his wife Sophia Conti-Reed, an accomplished violinist. Nothing suggested anything untoward, yet Sarah felt a strange uneasiness. In the photographs, Alexander's public smile never quite reached his eyes, which remained watchful, assessing. It was so different from the man who had made pancakes for her children and pointed out deer in the forest. She was still pondering this when the elevator announced Alexander's return. He emerged looking tired, his perfect suit slightly rumpled, his expression distracted until he spotted her. "Sarah," he smiled, transforming his face. "How are the children?" "Thriving." She gestured toward the kitchen where Lily was proudly arranging freshly baked cookies on a plate, and the living room where Ethan remained engrossed in his documentary. "Your staff has been wonderful." "Elena is a treasure," he agreed, loosening his tie. "The meeting ran longer than expected. I hope you weren't too bored." "Not at all. This place is—" Sarah gestured at the luxurious surroundings. "Well, it's hard to be bored in a palace in the sky." Alexander chuckled, but there was something strained in his manner. He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, then hesitated. "Would you care for one?" Sarah nodded, and he poured a second glass, handing it to her with a slightly unsteady hand. They moved to sit in the living area, keeping their voices low to avoid disturbing Ethan. "Is everything all right?" Sarah asked. "You seem troubled." Alexander took a sip of his drink, then set it down deliberately. "The meeting was challenging. A hostile takeover attempt of one of our healthcare investments, a company developing affordable treatments for rare childhood diseases." "That sounds important," Sarah said, sensing there was more to the story. "It is. But the acquiring company wants to dismantle it, sell off the patents, and discontinue research that isn't immediately profitable." His jaw tightened. "I spent 2 hours fighting to keep that from happening." "Did you succeed?" "For now." He looked down at his hands. "But they'll try again. They always do." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. "I thought business was just business. Isn't that what they say?" Alexander's gaze snapped up, intense and suddenly fierce. "That's what they say when they want to justify putting profits before people. When they want to sleep at night after making decisions that harm others." He caught himself, visibly reining in his emotion. "Forgive me. This particular situation is personal." "Because of Sophia?" Sarah guessed, the connection forming in her mind. "She died of cancer, and this company researches treatments—" "Yes." Alexander's voice was barely audible. "After she died, I redirected much of my financial focus to healthcare innovation, particularly in oncology and rare diseases. It's not entirely altruistic. These fields often yield significant returns. But the primary motivation is—" He trailed off. "To give her death meaning," Sarah finished softly. "To save others from what she went through." Alexander looked at her with an expression of surprise, as if she'd understood something few others did. "Exactly that." The moment was interrupted by Lily, who approached with her plate of slightly misshapen cookies. "Mr. Alex, I made these for you. Elena helped with the oven part." Alexander's demeanor changed instantly, warmth replacing intensity as he accepted a cookie with exaggerated appreciation. "These look magnificent, Lily. Did you know cookies are my absolute favorite food?" "Really?" Lily's eyes widened in delight. "Mine too!" "Clearly a sign of excellent taste," he declared, taking a bite and making an appreciative sound that caused Lily to giggle. Sarah watched the interaction with a mixture of emotions. Alexander moved so easily between worlds, from cutthroat business meetings to making a child feel special with just a few words. Which was the real man? Perhaps both were, each authentic in its own context. Lily, mission accomplished, returned to the kitchen to help Elena clean up. Ethan's documentary had ended, and he approached, slightly shy but determined. Mr. Reed, are you still taking us to Aunt Claire's today? That's the plan, Alexander confirmed. Are you looking forward to seeing your aunt? Ethan nodded. She has a dog named Rusty, and Uncle Mike said he'd teach me to play basketball. Excellent pursuits, both of them, Alexander said seriously. Dogs and basketball are cornerstones of a well-rounded education. Ethan smiled, visibly relaxing at Alexander's lack of condescension. Mom said you're a businessman. What kind of business? As Alexander explained his work in simplified but not childish terms, Sarah marveled at his ability to engage with her son. Richard had never had the patience for Ethan's questions, brushing them off or giving cursory answers. Alexander, by contrast, treated each inquiry with respect, as if the boy's curiosity was something to be nurtured rather than tolerated. After a light meal prepared by Elena, they prepared to depart for Colorado Springs. The children were freshly washed, wearing clean clothes retrieved from their suitcases. Sarah had also showered and changed, grateful for the chance to appear somewhat presentable when they arrived at Claire's. As they stood in the elevator descending to the parking garage, Sarah felt a curious mixture of gratitude and regret. Gratitude for Alexander's extraordinary kindness. Regret that their time together was coming to an end. He had entered their lives so suddenly, made such an impact, and soon would exit just as abruptly, returning to his world of business deals and mountain solitude. "You're quiet," Alexander observed as they settled into the SUV for the final leg of their journey. "Just thinking about what comes next," Sarah replied, fastening her seatbelt. "Back to reality." Alexander nodded, understanding in his eyes. The transition can be jarring. The drive to Colorado Springs took just over an hour, with the children once again entertained by the car's systems. Sarah provided directions as they entered the city, guiding Alexander through increasingly suburban neighborhoods until they reached Claire's comfortable two-story home on a quiet street lined with mature trees. Before they had even parked, the front door flew open, and Claire rushed out, her auburn hair, so similar to Sarah's, flying behind her. She embraced Sarah fiercely, then immediately pulled back to examine her, as if checking for damage. "You look exhausted but intact," she declared, then turned her attention to the children, enfolding them in warm hugs. "Oh, I've missed you monsters. You've grown at least a foot each." Mike appeared in the doorway, tall and solid, his beard neatly trimmed, his smile welcoming as he waved. A golden retriever, Rusty presumably, bounded out to investigate the newcomers, much to Ethan's delight. Throughout this reunion, Alexander remained by the car, a slight distance apart, observing the scene with an expression Sarah couldn't quite define, something between appreciation and longing. Claire finally turned to him, her initial wariness evident in her posture. "You must be Mr. Reed. I can't thank you enough for helping my sister and the children." "It was my privilege," Alexander replied with formal courtesy, extending his hand. "You have a lovely home, Mrs. Henderson." "Claire, please, and this is my husband, Mike." Mike stepped forward to shake Alexander's hand. "We owe you a debt, sir. If there's ever anything we can do—" "No debt," Alexander insisted. "I'm just glad I could help." There was an awkward moment where no one seemed sure what to say next. Sarah saw Alexander glance at his watch, and a sense of panic fluttered in her chest. He was leaving. Of course he was leaving. He had his own life, his own priorities. Their paths had crossed briefly due to extraordinary circumstances, but now those circumstances were resolved. "Would you like to come in for dinner?" Claire offered, her initial suspicions softening at Alexander's evident discomfort. "Mike's lasagna is legendary, and there's plenty." Alexander hesitated, looking torn. Sarah found herself holding her breath, unreasonably hoping he would accept. "Thank you, but I should head back to Denver," he declined with genuine regret. "I have early meetings tomorrow." The children's disappointment was immediate and vocal. "But Mr. Alex, you haven't met Rusty properly," Lily protested. "And I wanted to show you my basketball," Ethan added. Alexander knelt to their level, a gesture Sarah had seen him make several times. "Another time, perhaps. Your aunt and uncle have been waiting eagerly to see you, and I wouldn't want to intrude on your family reunion." He looked up at Sarah, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of connection, of something significant shared, even if briefly. "I'll help with the luggage," he said, standing and moving to open the SUV's cargo area. As he and Mike unloaded the suitcases, Claire pulled Sarah slightly aside. "He's certainly handsome," she murmured, "and those eyes, intense." "It's not like that," Sarah repeated her earlier protest, though with less conviction. "He's just been kind." Claire raised a skeptical eyebrow, but said nothing more as they moved toward the house, the children racing ahead with Rusty. When the luggage had been brought inside, and the children were distracted by Rusty and Mike's tour of the house, Sarah walked Alexander back to his car. The winter evening was settling in, street lamps creating pools of golden light along the sidewalk. Their breath formed small clouds in the cold air. "I'm not very good at goodbyes," Alexander admitted, stopping beside the SUV. "I never know quite what to say." "How about, 'It was nice meeting you'?" Sarah suggested with a gentle smile. "Though that seems inadequate given the circumstances." "Profoundly inadequate," he agreed. "Sarah, He hesitated, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." He produced a business card, pressing it into her hand. "My direct numbers are on the back. Cell, home, office, anytime, day or night." Sarah looked down at the embossed card, the weight of it substantial between her fingers. "I doubt you'll be rescuing us from any more blizzards." "Perhaps not, but there are many kinds of storms in life." His eyes, gray as the winter sky, held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You've been through several already, and I suspect there are more ahead as you rebuild your life. I would like to help, if I can." "Why?" The question escaped before she could consider its implications. "I mean, you've done so much already. Most people would consider their good deed completed." Alexander was quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting to the house where laughter could be heard from an open window. "Do you know what struck me most when I found you in that shed?" Sarah shook her head. "Not the cold or the danger or even your children's vulnerability. It was the story you were telling them. I could hear it as I approached. A tale about explorers finding warmth in a frozen kingdom." A small, wondering smile touched his lips. "You were freezing to death, Sarah, yet you were creating magic for them until the very end. That kind of courage, that kind of love, it's rare, extraordinary." He looked back at her, something naked and honest in his expression. "I've spent 12 years surrounded by people who want things from me, my money, my influence, my connections. Finding someone who expected nothing, who gave everything to others even in extremity. It reminded me of what matters, of who I used to be perhaps before grief and business hardened me." The confession left Sarah speechless. This powerful, wealthy man was thanking her, seeing value in her when she had felt nearly worthless for so long. "I should go," Alexander said, seeming slightly embarrassed by his disclosure. "Your family is waiting." "Will I see you again?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with her directness. Alexander's expression softened. "I'd like that. Perhaps when you're settled." He gestured toward the house. "Your new beginning deserves your full attention first." He opened the car door, then paused, turning back to her. With a gentleness that belied his strength, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles, an old-fashioned gesture that somehow suited him perfectly. "Until next time, Sarah Morgan." She watched as he drove away, the taillights of his luxury SUV disappearing around a corner. Only then did she realize she was clutching his business card so tightly it had left an impression in her palm. Inside, Claire was waiting with knowing eyes and a glass of wine. So that's just kind, huh? Sarah accepted the wine gratefully. It's complicated. It always is, Claire agreed, leading her to the kitchen where Mike was serving his famous lasagna to the excited children. But complicated doesn't mean impossible. The next days passed in a blur of activity. Claire and Mike's home was welcoming and comfortable, if somewhat crowded with the addition of 3 people. They had prepared the guest room for Sarah and converted a small office into a bedroom for the children, complete with bunk beds that delighted Ethan and Lily. Claire had arranged for Sarah to start her new job at Memorial Hospital the following Monday, giving them a week to settle in. The children were enrolled in the local elementary school, their records transferred with surprising efficiency thanks to Mike's connections in the school district where he taught high school mathematics. On the surface, everything was falling into place. Yet Sarah found herself experiencing unexpected moments of melancholy, often in the quiet evenings after the children were asleep. She would sit by the window, looking out at the unfamiliar street, feeling like a guest in someone else's life. It will take time, Claire reassured her when she confessed these feelings over late-night tea. You've been through a massive upheaval. Be patient with yourself. I know, Sarah sighed, and I'm grateful, incredibly grateful for everything you and Mike have done. It's just that you're used to being the provider, the caretaker, the one in control, Claire finished for her. And now you're dependent on others, which makes you feel both grateful and resentful at the same time. It's normal, sis. Sarah smiled wryly. When did you get so wise? I've always been the smart one, Claire teased, then grew serious. You'll find your feet again. You're the strongest person I know. Monday arrived, and with it Sarah's first day at Memorial Hospital. Claire, who worked in the radiology department, drove them together, giving Sarah a quick tour before escorting her to the administrative offices where she would be working. The job was exactly as described: scheduling surgeries, coordinating with insurance companies, managing patient records. It was detail-oriented work that required concentration and organization, qualities Sarah possessed in abundance. Her supervisor, Denise, seemed pleased with her quick grasp of the systems. You're a natural, Denise commented during lunch in the cafeteria. Most new hires take weeks to get comfortable with the software. I was an event coordinator before I had children, Sarah explained. The principles are similar: managing schedules, anticipating conflicts, juggling resources. Well, we're lucky to have you, Denise said. This department has been understaffed for months. By the end of the day, Sarah was exhausted but satisfied. The work wasn't exciting, but it was necessary, and there was comfort in that. More importantly, it was a step toward independence, toward rebuilding a life that belonged to her rather than being defined by Richard's absence. The children, meanwhile, had mixed experiences with their new school. Lily, naturally gregarious, made friends immediately and came home bubbling with stories about her new teacher and classmates. Ethan, more reserved, struggled to find his place. No one knows about the things I like, he complained over dinner that evening. When I talked about space, this boy Tyler said I was a nerd. Tyler sounds insecure, Mike commented, serving Ethan another helping of mashed potatoes. People who put others down for being smart are usually hiding their own insecurities. Ethan considered this. Mr. Reed didn't think I was a nerd when I asked about space. He said curiosity was a sign of intelligence. Sarah noticed Claire and Mike exchange a glance at the mention of Alexander. Mr. Reed is right, she affirmed. And intelligence is something to be proud of. Do you think he'll visit us? Ethan asked, looking up hopefully. He said another time when I wanted to show him my basketball. I'm not sure, honey, Sarah replied, feeling a pang at the disappointment in her son's eyes. Mr. Reed is very busy with his work. But he likes us, Lily chimed in confidently. He told me my cookies were magnificent. She pronounced the word carefully, clearly proud of mastering it. I'm sure he meant it, Claire said, giving Sarah a significant look. Perhaps you should call him, Sarah, just to thank him again. Common courtesy, really. Sarah shot her sister a warning glance. Perhaps. Later that night, after helping the children with bedtime routines that were still being established in the new household, Sarah finally had a moment to herself. She sat on the edge of the guest bed, her bed now, at least temporarily, and took Alexander's business card from her wallet. She ran her fingers over the embossed lettering, remembering his words. "If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." But what would she say? "Thank you again? The children miss you? I keep thinking about the way you kissed my hand." Feeling foolish, she returned the card to her wallet without making the call. Alexander Reed lived in a different world, a world of penthouses and investment firms and mountain lodges. Their paths had crossed due to extraordinary circumstances, but those circumstances were over. She had a new life to build, and it needed to be one she could sustain on her own. The weeks passed, falling into a rhythm of work, school, and gradually adjusting to their new reality. Sarah opened a bank account, started setting aside part of each paycheck for a future apartment deposit, and began researching used cars she might eventually afford. Small steps toward independence that felt monumental after months of crisis. The children settled in as well, though in different ways. Lily thrived, bringing home art projects and stories about her new friends. Ethan remained more subdued, making a few cautious friendships but still mentioning his old school with longing. "I miss my science club," he confided one evening as Sarah tucked him in. "They don't have one here." "Maybe we could find a different kind of club," Sarah suggested, "or a museum program." Ethan nodded without enthusiasm. "Tyler's still mean sometimes. He says we're charity cases because we live with Aunt Claire." Sarah felt a flash of anger, quickly suppressed. Some people say unkind things because they don't understand others' situations. It doesn't make them right. That's what Mr. Reed said about the business people who wanted to shut down the medicine company, Ethan recalled. He said they didn't understand what really mattered. Sarah was continually surprised by how much her son had absorbed from their brief time with Alexander. "He was a wise man in many ways," she agreed. "I wrote him a letter," Ethan admitted shyly, "to thank him for saving us and for talking to me about important stuff. Aunt Claire helped me find the address for his company on the computer." Sarah was touched by the gesture and slightly embarrassed that her 8-year-old had shown more initiative than she had. "That was thoughtful of you." "Do you think he'll write back?" "I don't know, sweetheart. He's very busy, but I know he was fond of you." The following Saturday, while Claire and Mike took the children to a local park, Sarah used the rare moment of solitude to search online for affordable apartments. Her salary at the hospital was modest but stable, and with careful budgeting she might manage a small 2-bedroom place after a few more months of saving. She was so absorbed in her research that the doorbell startled her. Assuming it was a neighbor or perhaps a package delivery, she opened the door without checking first. Alexander Reed stood on the porch, looking slightly uncertain, but as impeccably dressed as ever in casual weekend attire. Dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders and brought out the gray of his eyes. In one hand he held a large, flat package wrapped in brown paper. For a moment Sarah simply stared, convinced she was imagining things. But Alexander was undeniably real, his presence filling the doorway with the same quiet intensity she remembered. "Alexander," she managed finally, "this is unexpected." A smile touched his lips. "I received a very compelling letter that warranted a personal response." He held up the package. "May I come in?" "Of course." Sarah stepped back, suddenly conscious of her casual Saturday attire. Worn jeans and one of Claire's borrowed sweaters, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "The children are at the park with Claire and Mike. They'll be sorry to have missed you." "Actually, I was hoping to catch all of you," Alexander said, following her into the living room. "But this gives us a chance to talk first." Sarah motioned for him to sit, which he did, placing the package carefully on the coffee table. She noticed he seemed slightly nervous, his usual composure fractured by small tells, a tapping finger, a tightness around his eyes. "Ethan's letter was quite something," he began. "Remarkably articulate for an 8-year-old. He described your new life here in considerable detail, some of it quite amusing. Did you know he believes the hospital cafeteria serves the worst mashed potatoes in America?" Sarah laughed. "He may be right, they're suspiciously smooth. He also mentioned that a boy named Tyler has been giving him trouble." Alexander's expression grew more serious. "And that he misses his science club." "Yes to both," Sarah confirmed. "We're still adjusting. Ethan more than Lily. He's always found change more challenging." Alexander nodded. "That's partly why I'm here." He gestured to the package. "This is for him, though I'd prefer to give it to him myself, if that's all right." "Of course. They should be back soon." Sarah hesitated, then asked the question foremost in her mind. "Why are you really here, Alexander? Colorado Springs is a long way from Denver, let alone your mountain lodge." He met her gaze directly. "I've been thinking about you, all of you, more than I probably should." The admission seemed to cost him something, as if revealing vulnerability was unfamiliar territory. "I told myself I was simply checking in, being responsible after having rescued you. But that's not entirely honest." The frankness of his response caught Sarah off guard. Before she could formulate a reply, Alexander continued. "I'm also here on business. Memorial Hospital, where you work, is considering implementing a new oncology treatment protocol developed by one of my portfolio companies. I'm meeting with their board on Monday." He smiled slightly. "So my visit has legitimate professional justification if I needed one." "I see," Sarah said, digesting this information. "And will you be in Colorado Springs often then?" "That depends on several factors," Alexander replied, his eyes never leaving hers, "some professional, some personal." The implication hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Sarah was saved from responding by the sound of the front door opening and excited voices filling the entryway. "We saw ducks at the pond, and Uncle Mike let me throw bread even though there's a sign that says—" Lily's cheerful recounting stopped abruptly as she spotted their visitor. Her eyes widened dramatically. "Mr. Alex!" She launched herself across the room, colliding with Alexander, who had risen to greet them. He caught her easily, genuine delight transforming his serious features as Lily hugged him fiercely. "You came back! I told Ethan you would, but he said you were probably too busy with important business stuff." "Nothing is more important than keeping promises to friends," Alexander replied, looking over Lily's head to where Ethan stood in the doorway, frozen in disbelief. "You got my letter?" the boy asked, approaching cautiously as if Alexander might disappear if he moved too quickly. "I did. It was excellently written. Your teacher should be impressed with your command of descriptive language." Alexander gently disengaged from Lily to focus on Ethan. "And it inspired me to bring you something." He retrieved the package from the coffee table and presented it to Ethan, who accepted it with reverent hands. Claire and Mike had entered behind the children, Claire shooting Sarah a questioning look that clearly demanded details later. "Go ahead, open it," Alexander encouraged as Ethan carefully began removing the brown paper. Inside was a flat, rectangular case made of polished wood. Ethan unlatched it to reveal a brass telescope, gleaming in the afternoon light, nestled in velvet lining. His mouth fell open in astonishment. "It's a replica of a 17th-century astronomical telescope," Alexander explained, "but with modern optics that make it fully functional. I thought perhaps we could set it up in the backyard later. Saturn is particularly clear this time of year." This is... Ethan seemed unable to find words adequate to express his feelings. "It's a proper explorer's tool," Alexander supplied, "for a curious mind like yours." Ethan looked up, his eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. I've never had anything so amazing." "You're very welcome," Alexander replied, his voice gentle. "Your letter mentioned missing your science club. I thought this might help you continue your explorations independently." Sarah watched the exchange with a lump in her throat. The telescope was undoubtedly expensive, but Alexander had chosen it with such thoughtfulness, such specific attention to Ethan's interests and needs. It wasn't just a flashy gift meant to impress. It was a recognition of who her son was, what mattered to him. Claire broke the emotional moment with practical hospitality. "Mr. Reed, Alexander, will you stay for dinner? It's nothing fancy, just Saturday night pizza, but we'd love to have you join us." "I wouldn't want to impose," Alexander began, but was immediately contradicted by a chorus of voices, the children's being the most insistent. "Please stay, Mr. Alex," Lily begged. "You can have my slice with extra cheese." "And we need to set up the telescope," Ethan added earnestly. "Saturn, remember?" Alexander looked to Sarah, clearly leaving the final decision to her. She smiled, surprisingly pleased by the prospect of his company. "We'd all like you to stay." The evening that followed was one Sarah would remember for its strange, wonderful normalcy. Alexander fit into their family gathering with unexpected ease, helping Mike set up the grill for homemade pizzas, listening to Lily's elaborate stories about her new school friends, and, true to his word, assembling the telescope with Ethan in the backyard as dusk approached. Sarah, bringing out drinks for the stargazers, paused at the patio door to observe them. Alexander was kneeling beside Ethan, guiding the boy's eye to the telescope's eyepiece, his hand steady on Ethan's shoulder. The look of wonder on her son's face as he glimpsed celestial bodies for the first time made her heart constrict with emotion. "He's good with them," Claire commented, appearing beside her with a tray of desserts. "Not in that awkward, 'I'm trying to impress your mom' way some men have with kids. He actually engages with them as people." "Yes," Sarah agreed softly. "He always has." "And how do you feel about that?" "About him?" Claire pressed gently. Sarah watched as Alexander pointed out a constellation, his profile outlined against the darkening sky. Confused, cautious, curious. She glanced at her sister. "Take your pick of C words. How about chemistry? Because that's obvious to everyone with eyes." "Claire," Sarah protested, feeling her cheeks warm, "I'm just saying there's clearly something there. And he didn't drive all this way just to give Ethan a telescope, nice as that is." Before Sarah could respond, Lily's excited voice called from the yard. "Mommy! Aunt Claire! Come see the moon! It has critters!" "Craters, Lily," Ethan corrected with the long-suffering tolerance of an older brother. The women joined the stargazing party, each taking turns looking through the telescope while Alexander patiently adjusted the focus for each viewer. When it was Sarah's turn, she was acutely aware of his proximity as he stood behind her, guiding her to the eyepiece. "There," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "Can you see the rings?" She could, and they were breathtaking. Delicate, ethereal bands surrounding a golden orb. But equally distracting was Alexander's nearness, the subtle scent of his cologne, the solid presence of him just inches away. "It's beautiful," she murmured, straightening and turning to face him. In the dim light of the yard, his eyes were dark and intent on hers. "Yes," he agreed, though she had the distinct impression he wasn't talking about Saturn anymore. Later, after the children had been reluctantly sent to bed with promises that the telescope would still be there tomorrow, the adults gathered in the living room with glasses of wine. Mike and Alexander discovered a shared interest in vintage cars, launching into an animated discussion that revealed a more relaxed, boyish side of Alexander than Sarah had seen before. "You should see his SUV, Mike," she commented during a lull. "It probably costs more than our entire previous house." "The Defender?" Alexander looked slightly embarrassed. "It's somewhat excessive, I admit. A relic from my acquiring expensive toys phase after Sophia died. Retail therapy on a grand scale." The casual mention of his late wife surprised Sarah. He'd spoken of Sophia only once before, and then with careful control. "How long were you married?" Claire asked, her tone gentle. 7 years, Alexander replied, twirling the stem of his wineglass. We met in college. She was a music student, a violinist with extraordinary talent. I was studying economics and business, already too serious according to her. A fond smile touched his lips. She was right. She sounds wonderful, Sarah said softly. She was. Alexander's gaze grew distant. After she died, I threw myself into work, built Reed Ventures into what it is today. Success became a kind of shield. If I was busy enough, accomplished enough, perhaps the loss wouldn't matter so much. He shook his head slightly. It wasn't a particularly healthy strategy. The honesty of his self-assessment struck Sarah. How many people in his position would admit such vulnerability? When Alexander finally prepared to leave, it was nearly midnight. He'd booked a room at a downtown hotel, declining Mike and Claire's offer of their guest room with polite firmness. "I've imposed enough on your hospitality," he insisted. "Besides, I have early meetings tomorrow to prepare for." "Always working," Mike observed, shaking Alexander's hand warmly. "You should take some time off while you're here. Sarah could show you around." Claire elbowed her husband, none too subtly, but Alexander merely smiled. "That would be delightful if Sarah is willing and has the time." All eyes turned to her, and Sarah felt a moment of panic at being put on the spot. Yes, I'd be happy to," she managed, "though I'm still learning the area myself." "We could explore together then," Alexander suggested. "Perhaps tomorrow afternoon, if you're free?" "The children would love that," she replied. Then, with a courage that surprised her, added, "And so would I." Alexander's smile deepened, revealing that appealing dimple in his right cheek. "I'll call you in the morning to arrange details." At the door, he paused, looking down at her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "Thank you for today, Sarah, for welcoming me into your family gathering. It's been—" He seemed to search for the right word. "Healing." Before she could respond, he leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "Until tomorrow," he murmured, then turned and walked to his car, not the imposing SUV, but an equally luxurious sedan. Sarah watched him drive away, her cheek tingling where his lips had touched. Behind her, Claire cleared her throat dramatically. "So," her sister said, folding her arms with a knowing expression, "still just complicated?" Sarah closed the door, leaning against it with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. "More than ever," she admitted, "and I have no idea what happens next." Sarah woke early Sunday morning with a peculiar feeling of anticipation, like a teenager before a first date. The thought made her laugh at herself. She was a 35-year-old divorced mother of two, hardly a swooning adolescent. Yet the prospect of spending the afternoon with Alexander brought a lightness to her step as she prepared breakfast for the household. "Someone's cheerful this morning," Claire observed, accepting a cup of coffee and eyeing her sister knowingly. "Sleep well?" "Very," Sarah replied, refusing to be baited. "The children still asleep?" "Ethan's been up since dawn with that telescope, despite the fact that you can't see stars in daylight. Mike's with him, discussing the finer points of astronomical observation. Lily's still down for the count." Sarah smiled, picturing her serious son with his precious new gift. "That was incredibly thoughtful of Alexander. Ethan hasn't been this excited about anything since before the divorce." Claire took a sip of her coffee. "So what's the plan for your outing today? Dinner? A movie? Passionate confessions of undying affection?" "Claire!" Sarah protested, though without real irritation. "It's just an afternoon showing a visitor around town. Don't make it into something it isn't." "And what exactly isn't it?" Claire challenged gently. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks an awful lot like a successful, intelligent, devastatingly handsome man is very interested in my sister. And despite her protests, she seems rather interested in return." Before Sarah could formulate a response, her phone rang. Alexander's number, which she'd entered after he called the previous day to confirm Ethan's home address, flashed on the screen. "Good morning," she answered, ignoring Claire's exaggerated wink as she left the kitchen to give Sarah privacy. "Good morning, Sarah." Alexander's voice was warm, slightly rough, as if he too had just awakened. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all. Half the household is already up and running. Let me guess. Ethan with his telescope?" Sarah laughed. "How did you know?" "Because at his age I would have been doing exactly the same thing. The universe is particularly fascinating when you're just beginning to grasp its magnitude." They discussed plans for the day, settling on a 1 p.m. start. Alexander had done some research and suggested they might visit the Garden of the Gods, a natural landmark of dramatic red rock formations that Sarah had yet to explore despite Claire's recommendations. "The children will love it," she agreed. "There's plenty of space for them to run around and burn off energy." "I thought perhaps afterward we might have an early dinner," Alexander added. "There's a restaurant at the Broadmoor that's supposed to be excellent, child-friendly but still of good quality." The Broadmoor was one of the most exclusive resorts in the area, Sarah knew. "That sounds lovely, but perhaps a bit too upscale for a casual Sunday." "Ah," Alexander seemed to catch her meaning. "If you're concerned about the cost, please don't be. It would be my pleasure to treat all of you." "That's generous, but I wasn't angling for an invitation," Sarah clarified, not wanting him to think she was hinting for extravagance. "I never thought you were," he assured her. "One of the refreshing things about you, Sarah, is how completely unimpressed you are by wealth. But accepting a dinner invitation isn't the same as accepting charity. It's just good food in pleasant company." Put that way, it was hard to argue. "All right," she conceded. "But next time, I'm cooking for you." "I'll hold you to that," Alexander replied, a smile evident in his voice. "Until this afternoon, then." When Sarah shared the plans with the children after Lily finally woke, their excitement was immediate and vocal. Ethan wanted to bring his telescope to Garden of the Gods, convinced he might spot unusual geological formations, while Lily was most thrilled about dining at a fancy restaurant like princesses do. At precisely 1 p.m., Alexander arrived, once again in the luxury sedan rather than the SUV. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a light sweater under a well-cut jacket, looking relaxed yet somehow still distinguished. The children greeted him with enthusiasm, Ethan immediately launching into a detailed account of his morning observations, complete with technical terms he'd gleaned from the telescope's instruction manual. Alexander listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was taking the boys' scientific pursuits seriously. Garden of the Gods proved to be a perfect choice for their outing. The massive red rock formations jutting dramatically from the earth against the backdrop of snow-capped Pikes Peak created a landscape of otherworldly beauty. Ethan was entranced by the geology, especially after Alexander purchased a guidebook that explained the area's formation over millions of years. "It's like time travel," Ethan marveled, touching the ancient stone. "This rock was here when dinosaurs were alive." "Indeed," Alexander agreed, "and it will be here long after we're gone. There's something humbling about that, isn't there?" Lily was less interested in geological timescales and more focused on the shapes of the rocks, insisting that one formation looked exactly like an elephant and another like a sleeping giant. Her imagination transformed the landscape into a playground of mythical proportions. Sarah, watching her children explore with such delight, felt a rush of gratitude. After months of worry and hardship, seeing them simply being children again, curious, exuberant, carefree, was a gift beyond measure. "Penny for your thoughts," Alexander said, coming to stand beside her as they watched Ethan carefully documenting a rock formation in a small notebook he'd brought. "Just happiness," Sarah replied simply. "Seeing them like this. It's been a while." Alexander nodded, understanding in his eyes. Children are remarkably resilient, but they still need moments of wonder. "Like adults," Sarah observed, glancing at him. "Perhaps especially adults," he agreed. "We tend to lose our capacity for wonder as we age. It's a tragedy, really." They wandered the park for hours, following the children's lead. At one point, Lily ran ahead on a trail, and Sarah moved to call her back, concerned about her straying too far. "I'll get her," Alexander offered, quickly catching up to the girl. To Sarah's surprise, instead of simply bringing her back, he engaged with her game, pretending to be a friendly troll guarding the stone bridge she was attempting to cross. Lily's delighted giggles echoed through the rock formations as she negotiated safe passage with the troll, using a combination of politeness and bribery in the form of imaginary cookies. "Your mom never mentioned you were such a good actor," Sarah commented when they returned, Lily perched on Alexander's shoulders like a conquering hero. "There are many things your mom doesn't know about me yet," he replied with a wink that caused an unexpected flutter in Sarah's chest. As the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, they drove to the Broadmoor, an historic luxury resort nestled at the base of Cheyenne Mountain. The children were suitably impressed by the grand architecture and elegant surroundings, though Sarah had to remind Lily twice not to touch the ornate decorations in the lobby. The restaurant was everything Alexander had promised, sophisticated enough to feel special but welcoming to the children, with staff who treated Ethan and Lily with the same respectful attention they showed the adults. They were seated at a table with a spectacular view of the mountains just as the setting sun painted them in shades of pink and gold. "This is the prettiest place I've ever eaten at," Lily declared, carefully unfolding her napkin the way she'd observed the adults doing. "Eaten at," Sarah corrected gently. "It is rather magnificent," Alexander agreed, his eyes meeting Sarah's over the top of his menu. Though the company is what makes any meal truly special. The dinner was a leisurely affair, with multiple courses that introduced the children to new flavors and experiences. Alexander suggested dishes he thought they might enjoy, never pushing but encouraging gentle exploration. Ethan surprised Sarah by trying and appreciating a seafood appetizer he would have rejected outright just months ago. As they were finishing dessert, a decadent chocolate creation that had Lily literally bouncing in her seat with sugar-fueled excitement, Alexander's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned slightly. "Please excuse me, I need to take this," he said, rising from the table. "It's about tomorrow's hospital meeting." While he was gone, Ethan turned to Sarah with serious eyes. "Mom, is Mr. Reed going to be our friend for a long time? Or is he just visiting?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not sure, honey. Mr. Reed has his own life in Denver and at his mountain home, but I think he enjoys spending time with us when he can." "I hope he stays our friend," Lily said, chocolate smeared around her mouth despite Sarah's best efforts with a napkin. "He makes you smile the big smile." "The big smile?" Sarah questioned. Lily nodded emphatically. "The one that goes all the way to your eyes. You didn't do that smile for a long, long time after Daddy left. But you do it with Mr. Alex." Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought, touched by her daughter's observation. Before she could respond, Alexander returned, his expression troubled. "Is everything okay?" she asked as he resumed his seat. "Just a complication with tomorrow's presentation," he replied, clearly attempting to set aside whatever had disturbed him. "Nothing that can't be managed." The rest of the meal passed pleasantly, though Sarah noticed Alexander occasionally seemed distracted, his thoughts elsewhere. When the check arrived, he handled it discreetly, waving away Sarah's token offer to contribute. Outside, the evening had turned chilly, stars beginning to appear in the clear mountain sky. The children, despite protests that they weren't tired at all, were visibly flagging, the day's excitement catching up with them. "Ethan, look," Alexander pointed upward. "There's Saturn, just becoming visible." Ethan gazed up in wonder. "I'm going to look at it with my telescope when we get home." "Perhaps another night," Sarah suggested, seeing his barely suppressed yawn. "It's getting late." The drive back to Claire and Mike's house was quiet, the children dozing in the back seat. Sarah and Alexander exchanged occasional glances but didn't speak much, each seemingly lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but it held a weight of unspoken possibilities. When they arrived, Alexander helped carry the sleeping children inside, Ethan's head lolling against his shoulder as he carefully navigated the stairs to their bedroom. Sarah followed with Lily, touched by his gentleness as he laid Ethan on the lower bunk and stepped back to let her manage the rest. "They'll be talking about today for weeks," she said softly as they descended the stairs. "Thank you for making it so special." "It was my pleasure," Alexander replied. "Truly." Claire and Mike were out for the evening. "Dinner with friends," Claire had announced with exaggerated casualness, clearly attempting to give Sarah and Alexander privacy, so they found themselves alone in the quiet living room. "Would you like a cup of tea before you go?" Sarah offered. "Or something stronger?" "Tea would be perfect," Alexander said, following her to the kitchen where she filled the kettle and set out mugs. As the water heated, he leaned against the counter, watching her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you." The seriousness of his tone alarmed her. "What is it?" "My meeting at the hospital tomorrow isn't just about the oncology protocol. It's about a potential acquisition. If it goes through, I'll be spending considerably more time in Colorado Springs over the next few months, overseeing the transition." Sarah absorbed this information, unsure why he seemed so concerned about sharing it. "That sounds like it could be a good thing, both professionally and personally." "Yes," he agreed, "but there's more to it. The acquisition is likely to be hostile. The current administration may not take it well. And since you work there," understanding dawned. "You're worried it might affect my position?" "It's a possibility I can't ignore," Alexander admitted. "I've tried to structure the deal to preserve as many jobs as possible, especially support staff. But there will inevitably be changes. Consolidation. Politics." The kettle whistled, but Sarah ignored it, focusing on Alexander's troubled expression. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want there to be secrets between us," he said simply. "And because I want you to know that whatever happens with the acquisition, I'll ensure your position is secure." Sarah's back stiffened slightly. "I don't need special treatment, Alexander." "It's not special treatment to protect someone from being unfairly caught in corporate crossfire," he countered. "But I understand your reaction. Independence matters to you. Self-sufficiency." "Yes, it does," Sarah confirmed. "I've been fighting my way back to both since Richard left." Alexander stepped closer, his expression earnest. "I admire that about you. Your strength, your determination. I'm not offering protection because I think you need rescuing. I'm offering it because I care about you, about all of you, and I don't want my business dealings to cause you harm." The simple declaration, "I care about you," hung in the air between them, more significant than any grand profession of feeling might have been. Sarah felt the weight of it, the honesty behind it. "I care about you too," she admitted softly. "More than I probably should given how little time we've known each other." Alexander's smile was slow but transformative, lighting his eyes. "Time is a poor measure of connection, I've found. Some people can know each other for decades and remain strangers. Others—" He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Others recognize something in each other immediately." Sarah leaned into his touch, her heart racing. "And what did you recognize in me, Alexander Reed?" "Possibility," he answered, his voice low and intimate. "The possibility of beginning again." The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken emotion. Alexander's hand still rested against Sarah's cheek, his touch feather-light yet somehow anchoring. It would be so easy to lean in, to bridge the small distance between them. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the spell. Headlights swept across the kitchen window, Claire and Mike returning. Alexander stepped back, his hand falling away, though his eyes remained fixed on Sarah's. "Your sister has impeccable timing," he observed with a wry smile. Sarah laughed softly, feeling both relieved and disappointed by the interruption. She always has. The front door opened, Claire's voice calling out, "We're home!" Is everyone still alive?" "All present and accounted for," Sarah replied, moving to turn off the forgotten kettle. "The children are asleep." Claire appeared in the kitchen doorway, her gaze moving speculatively between Sarah and Alexander. "How was your day? The Broadmoor as amazing as they say?" "Even better," Alexander confirmed, "though I should be going. It's getting late and tomorrow will be an early start." Despite Claire's insistence that he could stay longer, Alexander made his goodbyes, promising to call Sarah after his hospital meetings. At the door he hesitated, then leaned down to place a brief but purposeful kiss at the corner of her mouth. Not quite her lips, but definitely not her cheek. "Until tomorrow," he murmured, echoing his words from the previous night, before slipping out into the darkness. Sarah closed the door, leaning against it for a moment to compose herself before facing Claire's inevitable interrogation. Sure enough, her sister was waiting in the living room, legs curled under her on the sofa, expression expectant. "So," Claire began, "on a scale from just friends to shopping for wedding venues, where are we now?" Sarah sank into an armchair, both exasperated and grateful for her sister's directness. "Somewhere in the complicated middle. He told me he's involved in a potential acquisition of the hospital." Claire's eyebrows shot up. "Memorial? Seriously?" "Apparently. He's worried it might affect my job, even though he says he'll protect my position." "And how do you feel about that? The protective part, I mean." Sarah considered the question. Conflicted. "I appreciate his concern, but I don't want special treatment. I need to stand on my own 2 feet." Claire studied her thoughtfully. "There's a difference between accepting help and being dependent, you know. Richard destroyed your trust, made you feel like accepting anything from anyone was weakness. But it's not. Sometimes it's just love." The word hung in the air, simultaneously too large and too simple for what was developing between her and Alexander. "It's too soon for that," Sarah protested. "Is it?" Claire challenged gently. "Because from what I've seen, that man looks at you like you've personally hung the moon and stars, and the way you light up around him. Well, it's the Sarah I remember from before Richard started undermining your confidence." Sarah had no answer for that. The conversation with Claire continued late into the night, exploring possibilities and concerns, hopes and fears. By the time she finally went to bed, Sarah's mind was still racing, replaying every moment of the day, especially those final minutes in the kitchen. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Getting the children ready for school, preparing for work, the usual chaos of a household with multiple schedules to coordinate. It wasn't until Sarah reached the hospital that she sensed something different in the atmosphere. Small groups of staff huddled in corners, conversations dropping to whispers as others passed. In the administrative department where Sarah worked, her supervisor Denise was closed in her office with several grim-faced executives Sarah didn't recognize. "What's going on?" she asked Carol, a fellow coordinator who'd been at Memorial for over a decade. "Rumor has it we're being bought out," Carol replied in a low voice. "Some big corporate healthcare consortium. The board's in emergency meetings all morning." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her stomach tightened with the knowledge that Alexander was likely in those very meetings, presenting his acquisition proposal. "Is that bad?" "Depends," Carol shrugged. "These takeovers usually mean restructuring. Some departments expanded, others consolidated. It's the not knowing that's worst." Throughout the morning, tension permeated the hospital. Staff checked their phones obsessively for updates, jumped at sudden noises, and speculated endlessly about what might happen. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but found her thoughts continually drifting to Alexander. Was he the villain in the drama unfolding around her, the corporate raider the staff feared? It seemed impossible to reconcile that image with the man who had knelt beside Ethan to show him Saturn's rings. Around noon, her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Would like to see you. Garden level, East Wing, Conference Room 3A." Sarah hesitated. Going might seem like she was choosing Alexander's side before knowing all the facts. Not going would be cowardly, avoiding a difficult conversation. In the end, curiosity won out. She made her way to the East Wing, an area she rarely visited, finding the conference room tucked at the end of a quiet corridor. Alexander was alone inside, standing by the window, his back to the door. He'd shed his suit jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, his shoulders tense beneath the fine fabric. "Alexander?" He turned, and Sarah was struck by how tired he looked, not just physically, but soul-weary. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit. I don't have much time." Sarah remained standing. "How are the meetings going?" "About as expected. Resistance, counter-proposals, the usual negotiation dance." He rubbed a hand over his face. "But I didn't ask you here to discuss that. I wanted to warn you. Your name came up." "My name? Why?" "One of the board members mentioned that you're new to the hospital. When I didn't react, he specifically said you'd been recommended by your sister who works in radiology. They're fishing, Sarah. Someone has connected us." Sarah felt a chill. "How would they know about us? We've only just met." "Small towns, long memories," Alexander replied grimly. "Someone probably saw us at the Broadmoor yesterday, or at Garden of the Gods. It doesn't matter how. What matters is they're trying to use you as leverage against me." "That's ridiculous. I'm just a coordinator. I have no influence over hospital acquisitions." "It's not about influence, it's about distraction, about throwing me off balance." Alexander's expression hardened. "It's an old tactic. Find something your opponent cares about and threaten it." The implication was clear, and Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions: worry about her job, indignation at being used as a pawn, but also a warm flutter at the confirmation that Alexander cared enough about her to be vulnerable. "What does this mean for me?" she asked practically. "In the short term, probably nothing, but be prepared for questions, for people watching you more closely." He hesitated. "If you'd prefer to keep your distance from me until this is resolved, I would understand." "Is that what you want?" Sarah challenged. "Of course not," Alexander replied immediately. "But I don't want to complicate your life more than I already have." Sarah considered this, then made a decision. "I've survived a divorce, near bankruptcy, and almost freezing to death in a blizzard. I think I can handle a few workplace rumors." A smile broke through Alexander's serious expression, transforming his face. "You are remarkable, Sarah Morgan." "I'm practical," she corrected. "And speaking practically, I should get back to work before people notice I'm missing." "Of course," Alexander checked his watch. "I have to return to the board meeting anyway. They've called in the chief of surgery to discuss implications for his department." He reached for his jacket, then paused. "Would it be presumptuous to ask if I could see you tonight? After the children are asleep, perhaps?" The question held layers of meaning, of possibilities. Sarah thought of Claire's words about trust and acceptance. "Not presumptuous," she said softly. "I'd like that." The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks underscored by undercurrents of anxiety throughout the hospital. Sarah kept her head down, focusing on her work, though she couldn't help noticing the occasional curious glance from colleagues. Had rumors about her connection to Alexander already spread, or was she being paranoid? When she met Claire after their shifts to walk to the car together, her sister looked troubled. "Rough day?" Sarah asked. "The worst," Claire confirmed, waiting until they were outside to continue. "The acquisition rumors are everywhere. People are panicking, especially since someone found out the company involved, Reed Ventures, specializes in healthcare optimization. Which means cutting costs, usually by cutting staff." Claire gave her a significant look. "Your Alexander is not popular in the hospital corridors today." "He's not my Alexander," Sarah protested automatically. "Isn't he?" Claire countered. "Because according to Janet in HR, he specifically asked about your employment status during a break in the board meeting." Sarah felt her face warm. He was concerned about possible repercussions for me. Claire's expression was knowing. Well, concern or not, it's now common knowledge that the handsome CEO has a personal interest in our newest coordinator. Prepare for workplace drama. Sarah groaned. Just what I needed. On the bright side, no one's likely to mess with you if they think you're dating the boss's boss's boss. We're not dating, Sarah insisted, though the protest felt hollow even to her own ears. Keep telling yourself that, Claire grinned as they reached the car. Oh, and by the way, he called the house while you were picking up the kids. Said he'd come by around 8. The evening passed slowly, a countdown to Alexander's arrival. Sarah helped the children with homework, supervised baths, and listened to their excited recounting of school adventures. Ethan had brought his telescope to school for show and tell, earning him newfound respect from classmates, including the previously antagonistic Tyler. He said it was actually pretty cool and asked if he could look through it, Ethan reported with obvious pride. I said maybe, if he stops being mean about us living with Aunt Claire. That was very mature of you, Sarah praised, smoothing his damp hair as she tucked him in. Sometimes people act mean because they're jealous or insecure. That's what Mr. Reed said about those business people. Ethan nodded seriously. Is he coming to visit us again soon? Actually, he's coming by tonight after you're asleep. Ethan's eyes widened. Like a date? Tyler's mom has dates sometimes. She gets all dressed up and smells like flowers. Sarah laughed, caught off guard by her son's perception. Not exactly like that, just to talk. You should still wear your blue sweater, Ethan advised. It makes your eyes look super blue. That's what Uncle Mike told Aunt Claire. I'll take that under advisement, Sarah replied, amused by his earnestness. Now sleep, young astronomer. School tomorrow. At precisely 8 o'clock, Alexander arrived, looking more relaxed than he had at the hospital despite still wearing his business attire. He'd loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar, giving him a slightly disheveled appearance that Sarah found unexpectedly appealing. Rough day? She asked, echoing her earlier question to Claire as she led him to the living room. Interminable, he confirmed, but productive. The board is considering our offer seriously now. And what does that mean for the hospital? For the staff? Sarah needed to know, even if the answer might create conflict between them. Alexander sat on the sofa, loosening his tie further. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not looking to slash jobs or reduce care quality. Reed Ventures specializes in optimization, yes, but through technology implementation and process improvement, not mass layoffs. That's not how people see it, Sarah pointed out, taking a seat across from him. There's real fear spreading through the hospital. I know. Alexander looked genuinely troubled. It's the unfortunate reality of acquisitions. Fear often precedes understanding. But I promise you, Sarah, my intention is to improve Memorial, not gut it. Something in his earnest expression made Sarah believe him, despite her natural skepticism after Richard's countless broken promises. I believe you, she said simply. The tension in Alexander's shoulders visibly eased. Thank you. That means more than you know. He leaned forward slightly. Now, can we please talk about something other than business? I've been in meetings for 12 hours straight, and all I've been able to think about is seeing you again. The directness of his statement sent warmth spreading through Sarah's chest. What would you like to talk about? You, he replied without hesitation. I want to know everything. Your favorite books, films, memories. What makes you laugh? What makes you cry? All the things people learn about each other when they're... He trailed off, seemingly uncertain how to define what was developing between them. When they're beginning, Sarah supplied, using the word he had chosen the night before. The possibility of beginning again. Alexander's smile was slow and appreciative. Exactly that. They talked for hours, moving from superficial topics to deeper ones with surprising ease. Sarah found herself sharing stories she hadn't thought about in years. Childhood adventures with Claire, Her college years studying hospitality management, the early days with Richard when everything had seemed full of promise. Alexander listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest, occasionally sharing his own parallel experiences. In turn, he told her about growing up as the son of a physics professor and an artist, his early business ventures, some successful, others spectacularly not, and his travels around the world. He spoke more about Sophia, too, not with the careful control of previous mentions, but with warm nostalgia, sharing funny anecdotes and fond memories. "She would have liked you," he said at one point, the statement simple but heavy with meaning. "She always said I needed someone who would challenge me, not just admire me." "And do I challenge you?" Sarah asked, curious. "Constantly," Alexander affirmed with a smile, "in the best possible way." As the night grew late, their conversation gradually slowed, comfortable silences extending between exchanges. Alexander glanced at his watch reluctantly. "I should go. You have work tomorrow and I have more meetings." Neither made a move to stand, however, both seemingly reluctant to end the evening. Finally, Sarah gathered her courage. "Or you could stay," she suggested quietly. "Just to talk longer." Claire and Mike converted the den into a guest room on the main floor. It's small, but the invitation hung between them, innocent on the surface but laden with implications for the future. Alexander's eyes searched hers, perhaps looking for certainty, for confirmation that this step, however small, was truly what she wanted. "I'd like that," he said finally, his voice low and intimate in the quiet room. "Very much." In the weeks that followed, Alexander became a fixture in their lives. Though his primary residence remained in Denver, he found reasons to be in Colorado Springs nearly every day, the ongoing hospital acquisition negotiations providing perfect professional cover for his personal priorities. He rented a small but elegant apartment downtown, explaining that hotel living quickly lost its charm. The children were delighted to have a new space to explore on weekend visits, especially the rooftop terrace where Ethan could set up his telescope away from city lights. Those weeks held a dreamlike quality for Sarah, as if she were living in a parallel reality where good things happened unexpectedly and happiness wasn't something to be guarded against. Alexander fit into their world with surprising ease, his initial formality gradually giving way to comfortable familiarity. He learned the children's routines, remembered Lily's aversion to green vegetables and Ethan's preference for bedtime stories about space exploration rather than fantasy. Small details that told Sarah he wasn't just tolerating her children to win her affection. He was genuinely investing in knowing them. Claire and Mike quickly adopted him into their extended family circle, Mike finding a kindred spirit for weekend automotive tinkering sessions in the garage, Claire appreciating his dry humor and unfailing courtesy. Even Rusty the golden retriever developed a special attachment, greeting Alexander with enthusiastic leaps whenever he arrived. "It's getting crowded here," Claire observed one evening as they prepared dinner, the sounds of Alexander reading to the children drifting from the living room. "Not that we mind, but have you thought about next steps?" Sarah looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. "What do you mean?" "I mean you've been dating for over a month. The hospital acquisition is nearly complete. The children adore him. Maybe it's time to consider your own place, possibly with Alexander involved in that decision." The suggestion caught Sarah off guard, though she'd had similar thoughts she hadn't yet articulated. "It's still early," she protested, "and complicated." "Life is complicated," Claire shrugged. "Doesn't mean you put happiness on hold." The hospital acquisition had indeed progressed, though not without challenges. True to his word, Alexander had insisted on minimal staffing changes, focusing instead on technological upgrades and process improvements. The initial fear had gradually transformed into cautious optimism as staff realized the promised investments were actually materializing. New equipment arriving, outdated systems being replaced, training programs established. Sarah's position remained secure, though she'd insisted on Alexander removing himself from any decisions related to her department to avoid conflicts of interest. Her colleague's initial wariness had evolved into a mix of curiosity and respect. She neither flaunted her relationship with Alexander nor denied it, answering questions honestly but maintaining professional boundaries. Not everything was smooth sailing, however. Richard had recently resurfaced, calling with sudden interest in seeing the children during his upcoming business trip to Denver. Alexander had been supportive, but Sarah noticed his jaw tightening when Richard's name was mentioned, a glimpse of a more possessive side he usually kept carefully controlled. Then there was the matter of their evolving relationship. Despite growing closeness and obvious mutual attraction, Alexander had been almost old-fashioned in his restraint, limiting physical affection to brief kisses and embraces when the children weren't present. Sarah appreciated his respect for her family situation but found herself increasingly impatient with the careful boundaries they maintained. Tonight, however, was different. The children were having a sleepover at a school friend's house, their first since the move, a small but significant milestone in their adjustment. Claire and Mike had tactfully announced plans to visit friends, leaving Sarah and Alexander truly alone for the first time since that night in the kitchen when Claire's return had interrupted their moment of connection. "Penny for your thoughts," Alexander said, entering the kitchen where Sarah was lost in reflection. "You've been quiet tonight." "Just thinking about how much has changed in such a short time," she replied, accepting the glass of wine he offered. 2 months ago we were freezing in that shed, convinced we wouldn't survive the night. And now?" He leaned against the counter, studying her with gentle intensity. "Now we're here, together. It seems impossible, like something from a movie rather than real life." Alexander smiled, that particular smile that transformed his serious features and revealed the dimple she'd grown so fond of. "Reality often exceeds fiction in both its improbability and its capacity for joy," he observed. "I never expected to find you, any of you, yet here we are." "Here we are," Sarah echoed, taking a sip of her wine. "Alone, for once?" Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a darkening of his eyes. "Yes, an unusual circumstance. One we should perhaps take advantage of," Sarah suggested, setting down her glass and moving closer to him, "since opportunities like this are rare." Alexander's breath caught audibly. "Sarah," he began, his voice lower than usual, "I want to be absolutely certain." "I am," she interrupted, placing her hand against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm, "completely certain." The last of his restraint dissolved as he pulled her into his arms, his mouth finding hers with an intensity that made her dizzy. Unlike their previous careful kisses, this was unleashed desire, months of building tension finally releasing. Sarah responded with equal fervor, allowing herself to want without reservation, to take without guilt. Later, much later, they lay entwined in Sarah's bed, the moonlight casting silver patterns across the rumpled sheets. Alexander traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, his expression one of wonder and contentment. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you in that shed," he confessed, despite the entirely inappropriate circumstances. Sarah laughed softly, nestling closer. "Even hypothermic and desperate?" "Even then. There was something about your courage, your fierce protection of your children." He kissed her forehead. "I felt as if I'd been sleepwalking through life until that moment. And now? Now I'm awake, fully, vibrantly awake." His expression grew more serious. "Sarah, there's something I need to discuss with you. Something important." She propped herself up on one elbow, suddenly concerned by his tone. "What is it?" "The hospital acquisition will be finalized next week. After that, my professional obligations in Colorado Springs will be significantly reduced." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "You'll be returning to Denver." "That's what I want to talk about." Alexander sat up, the sheet pooling around his waist. "I've been thinking about the future. Our future." if I'm presumptuous enough to imagine we might have one together." "I'd like that," Sarah said softly, her heart beginning to race for entirely different reasons than moments before. "I've come to a decision about some changes in my life," he continued. "I'm restructuring Reed Ventures, delegating more, focusing on strategic direction rather than day-to-day operations." "Because of us?" Sarah asked, concerned that he might be sacrificing career ambitions. "Because of what you've helped me realize," Alexander corrected, "that success means nothing without connection, without love." He took her hand, his expression earnest. "I've been offered a position on the board of Colorado College, a part-time role that would keep me in Colorado Springs several days a week. I'm inclined to accept." The implications were clear. He was rearranging his life to remain close to them. "Alexander, that's a major change. Are you certain?" "More certain than I've been about anything in 12 years, he replied without hesitation. "But there's more. I know you value your independence, your self-sufficiency. I respect that immensely, which is why I want to be completely transparent about another matter." Sarah braced herself, years of Richard's deceptions having trained her to expect the worst when conversations took serious turns. "I've established a trust fund for Ethan and Lily's education," Alexander stated, watching her carefully for her reaction. "It's completely segregated from my personal assets, irrevocable, and structured to activate regardless of our future together. I wanted you to know, but also to understand it comes with no strings attached." Sarah stared at him, processing this information. Her first instinct was to protest, to reject what might seem like charity or overstepping, but she recognized the thought for what it was, a reflexive response conditioned by Richard's manipulation of financial power within their marriage. "That's incredibly generous," she said finally. "But why?" "Because they deserve every opportunity," Alexander answered simply. "And because I care about them almost as much as I care about their mother." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not trying to buy affection, Sarah, or to make you dependent. It's simply something I can provide that might make their futures brighter." The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't Richard using money as control. This was Alexander using his resources to express love in a tangible way. "Thank you," she said, meaning it, "for thinking of them." Relief washed over his features. "So you're not angry?" "I'm adjusting to having someone in my life who gives without taking," Sarah admitted. "It's unfamiliar territory." Alexander drew her back into his arms. "There's one more thing," he murmured against her hair. "Richard called while you were in the shower earlier. He wanted to confirm arrangements for seeing the children tomorrow." Sarah tensed. "You spoke with him?" "Briefly. He was surprised to have me answer your phone." "I imagine so." Sarah couldn't help smiling at the mental image. "What did he say?" "He asked if I was serious about you, or if this was just a rebound fling." Alexander's tone was carefully neutral, though Sarah detected an undercurrent of controlled anger. "And what did you tell him?" Alexander tilted her chin up, his gaze intense. "I told him I'm in love with you, that I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it, if you'll allow me." Was that overstepping? Sarah's breath caught at the declaration, so plainly stated yet so profound. "Not overstepping," she whispered, "just unexpected." "Too soon?" he asked, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. "No," Sarah placed her hand against his cheek. "Not too soon. Perfect timing, actually." Alexander's smile was radiant. "Does that mean?" "It means I love you too," Sarah confirmed, the words surprisingly easy to say once she allowed herself to voice them. "Despite how improbable this all is, despite the complications, despite my fears, I love you." Their kiss sealed the declaration, tender rather than passionate, a promise rather than a desire. When they separated, Alexander pressed his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. Not the apartment, it's too small, and not the Denver penthouse or the lodge. Somewhere new, chosen together. A fresh start for all of us. The offer was tempting, but Sarah hesitated. The children are just settling in here. Another move so soon? We could take it slowly, Alexander suggested. Find the right place. Prepare them for the transition. But Sarah, I want to wake up with you every morning, help with homework and bedtime routines, build a life together that isn't fragmented by separate residences. His vision was compelling. A unified family, a shared home, daily life woven together rather than connected by visits and phone calls. Yet Sarah couldn't ignore practical considerations. Let me think about it, she requested. Not because I'm unsure about us, but because the children need stability, and because Richard's sudden interest in visitation might complicate things. Alexander nodded, accepting her caution without resentment. Of course, there's no rush. We have time. As she settled back into his embrace, Sarah allowed herself to imagine the future he proposed. A home chosen together, morning routines shared, evenings filled with family dinners and bedtime stories. It was everything she'd once dreamed of, everything she'd thought lost when Richard walked out. Yet beneath her happiness lurked a shadow of anxiety. Experience had taught her that perfect moments were fragile, that happiness could be swept away without warning. Tomorrow Richard would re-enter their lives, however briefly. The hospital transition would bring new challenges. The practical details of blending lives remained to be negotiated. But for tonight, in the quiet sanctuary of Alexander's embrace, Sarah chose to believe in possibilities rather than fears, in beginnings rather than endings, in love that came unexpectedly through a winter storm and changed everything. Sarah had imagined various scenarios for Richard's visit, most involving tension and awkwardness. What she hadn't anticipated was the sheer oddness of seeing her ex-husband standing in Claire's living room, looking both familiar and like a stranger. He'd gotten a new haircut, more stylish than his previous conservative style, and wore designer clothes that spoke of his newfound prosperity, or perhaps his girlfriend's influence. The children's reactions were equally unexpected. Ethan was reserved, polite but distant, while Lily greeted her father with enthusiasm that quickly faded when he responded with practiced affection rather than genuine warmth. Within minutes it became painfully obvious that Richard had arranged this visit out of obligation rather than desire. "They've gotten so big," he commented to Sarah, as if the children weren't standing right there. "Ethan looks more like my father every day." "They're doing really well," Sarah replied, keeping her tone neutral for the children's sake. "Ethan's fascinated with astronomy now, and Lily's reading at a level 2 years above her grade." Richard nodded, barely seeming to register the information. "That's great. Really great." His attention kept drifting to his phone, which buzzed repeatedly with messages he clearly wanted to check. When Alexander arrived, intentionally late to give the family private reunion time, the dynamic shifted dramatically. Richard straightened, instantly alert and evaluating. The men shook hands with surface civility that didn't disguise the undercurrent of mutual assessment. "So you're the rescuer," Richard said with a thin smile. "Sarah mentioned the car broke down. Lucky you were passing by." "Fortune favors the prepared," Alexander replied mildly. "Your children showed remarkable resilience in a crisis." The subtle emphasis on "your children" wasn't lost on Richard, who frowned slightly. "Yes, well, they've always been resourceful. Takes after me, I suppose." The planned outing, lunch followed by a visit to the local science museum, proceeded with surface pleasantness masking undercurrents of tension. Alexander remained deliberately in the background, allowing Richard space with the children, though his watchful gaze missed nothing. Sarah found herself continually comparing the two men, Richard's distracted impatience versus Alexander's focused attentiveness, Richard's performative affection versus Alexander's genuine engagement. "Daddy, look! Mr. Reed got me this telescope. It sees all the way to Saturn. Ethan exclaimed during lunch, momentarily forgetting his reservation in his enthusiasm. Richard's expression flickered. Mr. Reed seems to have been very generous. The edge in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Because he loves us, Lily stated with childish directness. He reads me stories and makes special pancakes and never ever says he's too busy. The innocent comparison landed like a slap. Richard glanced at Sarah, accusation in his eyes as if she had coached Lily to say this. Sarah simply returned his gaze steadily, refusing to accept blame for his own shortcomings. By mid-afternoon, Richard was checking his watch frequently. I should probably get going soon. Traffic back to Denver will be awful. But we haven't seen the space exhibition yet, Ethan protested, his disappointment evident despite his efforts to hide it. I'm sorry, buddy. Work calls. Richard ruffled Ethan's hair, a gesture the boy had once loved but now tolerated stiffly. Next time we'll do the whole museum, I promise. As goodbyes were exchanged in the parking lot, Richard pulled Sarah aside. He's quite the knight in shining armor, isn't he? He nodded toward Alexander, who was showing Lily something on his phone while giving them privacy. He's a good man, Sarah replied simply. I'm sure he is. Richard's tone suggested otherwise. Just remember, Sarah, when something seems too good to be true. Stop, Sarah interrupted firmly. You don't get to warn me about relationships after what you did. Besides, Alexander has been nothing but honest and supportive. And wealthy, Richard added with a knowing look. Quite the upgrade from a middle manager like me. The comment was so petty, so transparent in its jealousy that Sarah almost laughed. If you think Alexander's bank account is what matters to me, you never knew me at all. Richard had the grace to look slightly abashed. After an awkward moment, he sighed. The kids seem happy. That's good, I guess. They are happy, Sarah confirmed. They're healing. We all are. With final hugs for the children and promises to call soon, Richard departed. They watched his rental car disappear around the corner, a strange silence falling over the group. Well, Alexander said finally, who's still interested in that space exhibition? Ethan's face lit up. Really? We can still go? Of course, Alexander replied, as if it were obvious. The day is young, and space waits for no one. The remainder of the afternoon passed joyfully, Richard's abbreviated visit quickly overshadowed by the wonders of the museum. By the time they returned to Claire's house, tired but content, the encounter felt like a distant memory. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah and Alexander sat on the back porch, mugs of tea warming their hands against the early spring chill. Thank you for today, Sarah said softly, for giving Richard space, for salvaging the outing afterward. The children needed that. Alexander nodded, his expression thoughtful. They needed closure, I think. A chance to see their father as he truly is, not as their memory or hope painted him. That's an unusually philosophical take on what was essentially a failed parental visit, Sarah observed. Perhaps, but I saw their faces when he left early. Disappointment, yes, but also understanding. Ethan, especially, seemed to be processing something important. That his father's priorities lie elsewhere, Sarah said with a twinge of sadness for her children. Which is painful but clarifying, Alexander replied. Sometimes knowing where you truly stand allows you to move forward. Later that week, Sarah found evidence of Alexander's insight when she overheard a conversation between the children in their bedroom. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but Ethan's serious tone as she passed their door caught her attention. It's okay to still love Dad, her son was saying to Lily. But it's also okay that Mr. Reed is more like a real dad now. Will he be our dad for real someday? Lily asked. There was a pause before Ethan answered, I think he wants to be, and I think Mom wants it too. I want it, Lily declared decisively. He makes Mom happy. She laughs all the time now. Yeah, Ethan agreed. Remember how scared we were in the snow? And then he found us. Like magic. Lily said, her voice full of wonder still. Not magic, Ethan corrected in his serious way. Just someone who cared enough to look. Sarah stepped away from the door, tears pricking her eyes at her children's simple wisdom. Later that night, she called Alexander. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said without preamble, "about finding a place together." "And?" His voice was carefully neutral, though she could hear the hope beneath it. "I think it's time. The children are ready. I'm ready." His exhale of relief was audible. "You're sure?" "I overheard them talking today. They've already made you part of our family in their minds. The rest is just logistics." The search for their new home became a family project over the following weeks. Alexander approached it methodically, creating a spreadsheet of requirements and preferences, while Sarah focused on the emotional aspects, the feel of each space, whether it seemed like somewhere memories could be made. The children contributed their own priorities. Ethan wanted a yard suitable for stargazing, while Lily insisted on a room that could be painted pink. They found it on a Sunday afternoon in late April, a craftsman-style home on a quiet street with mature trees, just a few blocks from a well-regarded elementary school. It needed some updating, but the bones were solid, the rooms spacious and filled with light. As they wandered through the empty rooms, Sarah could already envision their life there. Holiday gatherings in the dining room, quiet evenings by the fireplace, weekend breakfasts in the sunny kitchen. "This is it," she said, finding Alexander on the back deck where he stood watching the children explore the yard. "This is home." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the same certainty she felt. "It feels right, doesn't it?" "It does," she confirmed, "like it was waiting for us." The purchase proceeded with surprising smoothness, Alexander's financial resources and business acumen removing obstacles that might have stalled others. By early June, they were preparing to move in, the house refreshed with new paint, updated systems, and carefully chosen furnishings that blended items from both their lives. On moving day, Claire and Mike arrived with coffee and donuts, ready to help wrangle boxes and furniture. The children darted from room to room, their excitement contagious as they claimed their spaces and made plans for decoration. "You did it," Claire said, finding Sarah alone in the kitchen, unpacking dishes. "A new beginning." "We did," Sarah agreed, looking around at the sun-filled space that would soon be the heart of their blended family. "It doesn't feel real sometimes." "The best parts of life often don't," Claire observed, handing her a mug of coffee. "But that doesn't make them any less true." As evening approached, most of the essential unpacking was complete. Claire and Mike departed with promises to return the next day, leaving the new household to settle into their first night together. Alexander ordered pizza, a moving day tradition he insisted upon, and they picnicked on the living room floor, surrounded by half-empty boxes and the pleasant chaos of transition. After the children were tucked into their new beds, Sarah found Alexander on the back deck, gazing at the twilight sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Happy?" she asked, joining him. "Beyond measure," he replied, drawing her into his arms. "Though I keep expecting to wake up and find myself back in that empty lodge before I found you in the snow." Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "If that happened, would you drive out in the blizzard again, knowing all the complications that would follow?" "Without hesitation," Alexander answered, his voice vibrating beneath her ear. "I'd drive into 1,000 blizzards to find you," Sarah smiled, remembering the desperate woman in that frozen shed, telling her children stories to keep hope alive while silently preparing for the worst. How impossible this future would have seemed to her then, this love, this home, this second chance. "It's strange," she murmured. "That night in the storm, I was certain it was the end, but it was really just the beginning." Alexander's arms tightened around her. Beginnings sometimes disguise themselves as endings. It takes courage to recognize them for what they truly are. As darkness fell completely, Ethan's voice called from inside. "Mom! Alexander! Come quick! I can see Jupiter from my window." They shared a smile of perfect understanding before moving together toward the warmth of their new home, leaving the winter's cold and darkness behind. Not forgotten, but transformed into the foundation of everything that mattered now. In that frozen shed months ago, Sarah had told her children a story about explorers finding warmth in a magical kingdom beyond the snow. She'd never imagined the story would become prophecy, that they would indeed find not just physical warmth but the deeper heat of belonging, of family rebuilt, of love that arrived unexpectedly through a winter storm and changed everything. But the best stories, she had come to understand, were often the ones you never saw coming.
If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.